Welcome to Lean Into Excellence, a Workstream Consulting podcast. I'm Liz Crescetti.
And I'm Marco Bonilla.
And we will be your hosts as we embark on our continuous improvement journey.
Welcome back to another episode of Lean Into Excellence. So Marco and I, we talk a lot about process improvement on this show, but today we're going to be zooming in on a topic every organization wrestles with, and that is how to manage costs without cutting value. And joining us to discuss this is Mr. Duane Deason. He has spent the last 25 years helping organizations manage costs and operate more efficiently. He's a CPA, he's a Georgetown MBA, and he is the founder of the Efficacy Group. So, Duane, welcome to the podcast.
Liz, Marco, thank you. Glad to join you.
Yes. Do you mind just giving a quick background for our listeners?
I started my career off with what is now PricewaterhouseCoopers, and I was just thinking about this earlier. I think I was about 27 when I started a business that was helping companies do transactions, so financial transactions. They were doing either IPOs, M&A type activity. So through my timing was very fortunate because what happened is that it was right at the dot-com boom. And so there was a lot of transactions going on. And so I was very fortunate to get a lot of business through that. And I grew that company all through 2000. And then again, with timing, I got acquired by a local company and exited right before the dot-com bubble bust. And so I was fortunate in that way. After that, I went on board with one of my old clients that had done an IPO and had lots of cash, but was burning through it quickly and was really doing the Titanic. And I went on board to try to control and manage the costs. That's what the management team there was looking for. And I really enjoyed that work. By the time I was done, the company went from a high burn rate to cash flow even, and we attracted a buyer, and we were able to get a graceful exit. And I felt like I really helped that company from avoiding bankruptcy and saved a lot of jobs, saved the business. Because of that, it was the catalyst for me wanting to pursue cost management and rationalization of costs as a career. And so I've dedicated the next 25 years, as you mentioned, to that. And that's been in various capacities. Most of the time, I work through the Efficacy Group a lot, sometimes on my own for smaller companies. I team up with the larger organizations when we have large companies that need that type of help. And sometimes I've even gone on board twice with a company that as a chief procurement officer or some other type of role that focused on cost controls. And just recently, I decided I wanted to kind of expand the methodology. I feel like a lot of companies manage costs very poorly, and I think it's hurting everything from employees to shareholders to customers. And I feel like there's a better strategy and a better methodology, and that's why I just published my book. It's Operationally Svelte: Manage Costs to Increase Profit and Enhance Performance.
That's great, and that's a great title, I must say.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
Now, you've had a really fascinating career path. Launching your own firm and stepping in as a CFO at a struggling public company. What did these experiences teach you about cost management, and especially at scale?
Yeah, I think what I've learned is that as companies get larger and larger, they can't help but to become more inefficient. It's almost like it's just an evolutionary process, and a lot of companies can through, if they're really focused on it, they could control that, but most do not. And I think a lot of that is because they attract a management team that is a visionary management team. And that is great. And it's great to have a visionary at the top. But the problem is a lot of visionaries are attracted to other visionaries. And what happens is that you get a whole management team of visionaries, and that no one is necessarily that good at building a successful and stable and efficient operational structure. And over time, inefficiency enters into the organization. It starts to bleed profits. It even starts to stifle innovation. And you get a lot of organizational bloat that can really bring down an organization. And so I feel like over time I've learned that to recognize that and help companies see it themselves, because a lot of times they're not aware of it. They're just not meeting their numbers, and they have trouble rationalizing why.
Duane, do you think from an outside perspective, the reason that happens is because companies historically have been judged on how much money they make, not so much the cost structure? Cost is really internal, and a growth of a company is usually external based on revenue, right? Yes. Do you think that's why?
I think that's a big part of it. I think, and it's actually very true in the United States. We kind of tend to feel we can outgrow our problems. And even investors try to if you go into an investor and you say, look, I have a slow, steady business, a venture capital company, in many cases, they're not that interested in slow, steady growth.
Yeah.
They want that hockey stick. It's all about how quickly do you get that revenue up, and what is your product unique, and the vision. And it's really not necessarily that much focused on how do you build a stable foundation. And so I feel like that's part of our cycle, is that we reward both financially and even society rewards companies that grow really fast and that are really exciting and cool. And unfortunately, a lot of them in that process build an organization that can't last because it's got a weak foundation of a cost structure. And then when all of a sudden they start, whether it's through competition or just market saturation, they start flatline on their sales. And they have a lot of struggle to try to rationalize the business because they never really looked at it that way.
And the cost is still growing exponentially, right? To some degree.
Yep. And I think they get themselves a little bit into what I consider a little bit of a death spiral here, where what happens is they miss sales or they miss budget. And so they decide they have to cut costs. And the first thing they do, because what I do is I look at all costs, but many companies that takes time, and they don't want to take that time. They want something quick. And so they turn to headcount. And so they cut headcount quickly. And it tends to be a little bit of a spiral because you cut the headcount. Now you have less people there to properly manage the costs, less people to execute on the business, and you continue to perform poorly. And now you have to cut costs again because you're not performing well, and you cut headcount again, and you kind of continue to spiral down. And when I see companies in that spiral, it usually doesn't end well, unfortunately.
Duane, I agree with you. I've taught classes in marketing, and I know marketing is one of the first, because of the overhead. But, I tell, as a former engineer, I didn't understand this, is that marketing is the pipeline that feeds business. So if you get rid of marketing, you're just hurting yourself long term. Maybe not short term, but long term. Yeah. That revenue where your competition is ahead of your game, you're starting to chase if you even get back there, right?
Wow, that's and it's an interesting point, because marketing is one of the toughest areas at companies to manage. I think it used to be technology, and it may become technology again, interesting enough, because of AI. But technology back in the 2000s, if they couldn't get enough budget. It was like, how much technology can you implement? And it was very hard to try to get them to manage costs, because it was just like more and more and more. And then that turned about a decade ago, where all of a sudden companies start saying, cutting technology budgets, and you've got to do better with less. And so it became much more challenging for them. And that, they may shift with AI now, and I'm kind of curious to see how that plays out. But back to marketing, I have for whatever they are the most interesting group, because they are always more and more, and you never know how to find that right balance. Or they're ones that always use that line as soon as I say, "Hey, can we look at this?" Hey, if you cut that, it's I can't make my revenue targets.
Yeah.
That's a favorite line. Of course, the CEO, it works every time, because the CEO is like, well, we got to make a revenue target.
Well, they're marketing, right? They know how to market themselves. So
yes, they are very good at it. So I have a love-hate relationship with many marketing folk here, but I'm glad. It's impressive that you're teaching that as a class, yet you are like-minded in efficiency. So that's interesting.
I've seen it over and over again in companies I've worked for, that, as you know, when companies panic and they start slashing headcount,
yes,
I don't think it's a logical process. Don't get me wrong. If you wait to slash headcount to those situations, that's poor timing. Now, if there's individuals in a company that should have been looked at prior to this, now that's a leadership issue, right? Waiting for a headcount.
But just to say off the bat, 10% need to go tomorrow is,
yes.
And that's where we experience that a lot too, going in is, being on the, process improvement side. A lot of times people look at us coming in thinking our job is to eliminate their job, or essentially, where do we look for waste, or where do we look for inefficiency? And the logical move that people think in order of cost savings is just cut headcount. But no, we're really peeling that onion back, being like, what areas are really creating this waste, or where are the inefficiencies? Because ideally you'll keep the headcount, but you'll change the process so it's actually more efficient, and you're actually able to save that money. In your experience, what are some of the most common issues that you think lead to inefficiency and waste within these organizations?
Well, Beyond the one issue I mentioned earlier about that, I think executive leadership tends to be visionary and attract other leadership. And because they don't have diversity of leadership, they tend not to be able to build a good foundation. Beyond that, I do think that companies rely too much on budgets as the holy grail of cost control. And the problem with it is that budgets are essentially, a lot of it is based on inertia. It's about what happened last year, and that's where your starting point is. And, they arbitrarily say, we're going to cut X amount, or we'll give you X amount. And it's sometimes if the executive is good at selling, they can get better budgets and that type of thing. And it's not really a sign of cost efficiency. And yet I think there's a misnomer that it is. So I tend to fault companies a little bit for over relying on budgets as a sign of efficiency, and that goes back to, as soon as they miss budget, then that's a sign that they're inefficient. When it might be a sign that they may be suffering because they're not getting enough capital, or it might be they're too flush and they're being wasteful. And so I think that's a big aspect of that. And then beyond that, I see a lot of other miscellaneous issues. One of the bigger ones being what I call the culture of cost awareness, where I think that within companies, employees are not very cost aware. Many of our employees live paycheck to paycheck. They have incredible credit card debt. They're not necessarily financially savvy. And of course, they bring that to the company when they come on board. Unless they're instilled with a different value or different expectation, they're going to carry that with them. And I always kind of joke the management team, if you want to ask the employee to spend money like it's their own, you ought to be careful what you wish for, because that's not necessarily a good thing.
Yeah.
And so now the good thing about that is that it is relatively easy to correct, because I think employees will, if you give them training and expectations and set the standard from leadership, because sometimes leaderships they're not actually showing proper cost management themselves, and that again is contagious. It ripples, employees see it. But if the leadership is showing by example and you do training, I think you can really change the culture, and it's contagious. I think once you start, and you can start rewarding employees for cost savings, and not only financially, but even recognizing them at company meetings. Like, this team did X, Y, and Z, and it saved the company this. And once employees start seeing that, I think you'll start experiencing a lot more financial awareness, which will help the company overall.
Duane, I fully agree with you, especially when it comes to changing the culture. You have to provide knowledge to every cog in that wheel, up and down the chain of command, right? And left to right. Because if not, I assume, Duane, that if companies are in panic mode and they bring you in for cost management, if you don't change the culture, it's going to be a one-time event. Yes, that's right. For this quarter, look what we did. And then everything becomes a kind of feedback loop to what it was, right? So if you don't change the culture, I assume, in your experience, if you don't educate the people that's within, that can help, it's just going to revert back, because that's the difference between the momentum going forward and just cracking the whip, right?
100%. And if I could go back to the same company after I've left it 3 years, and find them savings all over again, because that's the premise I put in my book as far as what the solution is. Part of my book is about what the problem is. And of course, I tried to go over a solution. And a big part of that solution is to essentially put together an internal cost management team. And this, because right now I feel like costs are really dispersed throughout an organization. Those managing those costs are dispersed throughout the organization. And many of them have leadership that are good. Some might be good at cost savings and managing costs. Many are not. Back to that technology example, you can have someone very good at technology that is not necessarily good at managing costs. And so by consolidating that under one team, then I think, and making it an internal team, I think you get a lot more consistency. And Marco, what you were describing is and probably what I do as well. First thing when I go into a company, and usually with a team, is we are an external cost management team. And so what they need to do is instill that internally. And have that knowledge and carry that knowledge after we're long gone.
Oh, absolutely. You know what, Duane, you kind of touched upon a couple of things I want to ask you about. How often do companies bring you in as for lack of a better word, as an auditor? We just need a diagnosis. Give me the outside view of a diagnosis. Part two of that, how many of those turn into, we need you to execute for us because we just don't have the culture yet or the manpower, right? Yeah. For lack of a better word. So, what's the balancing percentage, I guess?
So as far as how I'm bought in alone, it's much more companies that are looking for what you're talking about, like an audit, maybe even of a particular area. It starts like saying,
Mhm.
we know we have a problem here and we'd like you to take a look. So I've been called in before. And then usually what happens is once we have success in the area, they expand it. Um,
Mhm.
for companies that are a little bit more dire financial situations, and they're not going to go to their board and say, we hired Duane Deason to save the company. And they'd be like, who? They're going to go to the board. They want to have a big name like Alex Partners or Oliver Wyman or some firm that has a strong reputation in that, and particularly those large public companies. And so
Right.
sometimes I get white labeled and I go in with some of those teams, and I get to look at it that way. But I would say that I often get hired to scrub a particular area because it's bought in by one individual. It expands from there, and because we continue to have success. And what Liz was talking about earlier is that when I first get in there, that the employees can be very nervous about when I first show up, and that, oh, I'm here to take their job, or they're going to get in trouble.
You're the
And I
Grim Reaper.
quickly try to help elevate them and make them an ally. Whenever we find something, it's a team effort, and we did
Mm-hmm.
this together. And before you know it, they're happy as a clam because I've helped make them look good. And now because of that, word gets out, and I go to the next area and the next area. The only danger sometimes with that is that kind of slow ripple, and it's happened to me several times, is that one department will hear I'm coming. And what they do is they're so eager to try to clean themselves up before I get there that they'll go make some bad deals to do that. I've had situations where, I don't care if it was a law firm, they went in there and he said, Duane, great news. I negotiated 5% reductions from in the legal fees in the rates. And I'm like, well, my par is 10 to 20%, so you didn't really help me here,
Yeah.
So I've had several circumstances where companies have turned a large opportunity into a small one because they were trying to you kind of show that they could do it without an external party type thing. So when you have use your experts, they don't, and
Mhm.
you want to make sure the people internally learn it. So after they're gone, they continue that knowledge and that habit, but use your resources is maybe
Yeah,
number one.
Dwayne, it's so funny you should say that because our philosophy, most of the colleagues I have on in this company, is that when we go into a facility, you guys are the experts, right? I'm not here to tell you. We need to come up with a solution together. I'm
Yes.
here to help maybe take away some of the fog, right? Because as you know, and we all been there, right? We get on this hamster wheel. We just can't slow down enough. We can see there's problems, but we just can't. We got to produce. So
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
always in the mindset is I'm not here. And again, it's a stigma that we get especially when the word lean, Six
Yes.
Sigma, right? They
Right.
think it's headcount. And
Yeah.
that's the one thing that really boils my, because it's just not what we want to do. We don't want to do that. We want to improve your efficiency so you can produce more with the
Yeah.
people you have.
Yeah.
Not stay status quo and release people. So you're still at the same place. You're more
Yeah.
efficient.
Much more effective as a team, if everyone's
Exactly.
aligned. Yeah. And I love Six Sigma people with that background because they can look at a process and find things that I didn't even know was broken. Because my approach is generally I look at the cash. Where's the money going? And I
Yeah, the
start
flow
scrubbing
cash.
from the top down, right? In
Yeah.
that way. But that's not necessarily a great way always to catch errors and issues. So for example, if you have somebody on a website that is trying to sign up for a subscription and they can't get through and they get frustrated and they're dropping out, I won't catch that by looking at their high dollar cost type of thing, where Six Sigma is much more likely to take a
Do
look
the
at something and
details.
how do we
Yeah.
fine tune this and correct this. So the two philosophies and methodologies I think complement each other very well in that type of thing.
I think so too, Duane. I mean, we're in the same business per se. Our
Yes,
tactic is probably slightly different,
that's
right?
right. That's right.
Yeah.
But both helpful.
Duane, how often do you run into a situation? Again, I asked you about diagnosing, right, as an auditor versus actually executing. If they say, we need you to come in and do this, how willing are they, right? Because sometimes it's an uphill battle. You need to have
Sure.
champions
Sure.
internally, but the champions aren't necessarily in the trenches with you. Right?
Yes.
You're fighting that battle with individuals or forget individuals, old culture, right?
Yeah. Yes.
How is that struggle with you?
And it can be mixed. So usually I'm being sent there by a senior leadership. And I have that person's ear. And so even if, and a lot of times they send me into silos where one of the problems is that team or department is not really operating, playing well with others and not letting people in and doing type of things. But, when you drill down on data, it's hard for someone to stop you, that type of thing. And many times, and I would say most times, by the time I leave, those very individuals that were hesitant and didn't even really want me there in the first place, by the end, we're keeping in touch. There's hugs on the way out the door. It's a very different relationship. If I've done my job right, I would say if there's still tension on the way out, I wonder in some ways if I've failed, because my job is to help make them look good. And also, of course, in that process, of course, help the company.
Yeah.
But that's kind of how I view it.
I assume that tension or hostility was there before you got there. I assume because the reason you're being brought in is because that relationship, right? Absolutely. And I guess now the shoulders are more relaxed, right? They're leaned back. They say, you know what?
That's right.
Duane is helping us to be better. He's not here to point fingers or whatever the case might be, and just open up that via of communication between them and the struggles they have within the company.
Yeah. In many cases, I help save their budget. And so they can use those funding for other resources and other efforts that they want to pursue.
Yeah.
And so in some ways I help make their job easier. If I'm helping them operate more efficiently in one place, it doesn't necessarily mean that they don't get to spend that in other initiatives. Sometimes they do. And so in the end result, they're pleased with it. There is a rare circumstance where there's somebody that tries to resist all the way. And I don't mind at that point recommending to management that I just feel that that's a more cultural fit for the company. And in the long run, after I'm gone, or that individual is not going to be helpful to the company.
Yeah.
Right. I think that's part of what we do is to not only recommend, specific vendor changes and process changes. Sometimes it's personnel changes that need to make the difference.
Every company has one or two or several.
I wish it was only one or two.
I know, right? I mean,
I work with one, Duane. Is it
No,
that or is this for him?
Marco. So I would say, over communicating, I think not even just explaining what is going on, but why it is happening is really important, because it's the big why, right? Why is this happening?
Yeah.
But yes, I agree with all that. Now, we mentioned AI in the very beginning, and of course, that's something that everyone's talking about. I think 2 episodes ago, we were discussing AI. What role do you see it playing in helping companies lower cost?
So I watched that episode, by the way. It was a great episode. And I agreed with your guest there that everyone there's a huge range of what people think AI will do to companies. With your prior guest, I agree that right now it's progressive. It is making a difference. And I think that guest used examples of call centers. Commonly you hear about software development and efficiencies there. And I love the notes I get from after meetings now that automatically come my way. And there's a lot of efforts to create marketing assets and those type of things. So there's some real changes that are happening at this point. I don't think it's the flood that is being described yet. And I think what's going to happen, and it's going to be an interesting phenomenon. When I first wrote my book about a year ago, I wrote a chapter that had AI technology in it. And it's interesting. Every time I picked it up, 3 months later, I had to rewrite it because it was changing so rapidly. So it's almost difficult to talk about what will happen because you're obsolete almost as the words come out. But I do think that you're going to see a lot of companies are investing huge amount of money and these are SaaS companies, in creating AI for their applications. They're going to want to recoup those costs. And so if you are buying Workday or Salesforce products and those type of things, and all that AI is going to, they're spending billions on that type of thing, they're going to pass that cost on their customer. They're going to need to recoup that. And it has to find a way that also translates in savings for their customers, right? So if you just end up paying more for AI and you don't really have a benefit of that, then you're argue whether you're winning or losing on that, certainly from a cost standpoint.
Yeah, Duane, I've thought about that too, because it's the new shiny thing, if you know what I'm saying.
That's right.
It's the new language, right? So just like big data, right? People invested tons of big data, and we see companies collect a lot of big data, but they're not doing anything with it. It's just the thing they just hopped on last, right? It's
That's
a new
right.
shiny toy, if you know what I'm saying.
No, that's right. That's right. It was true. If you remember the cable, and we had a lot of dark fiber for a while there because people overthought that one. Even the internet and the .com, where they kind of overthought that one, and so we have a lot of history for this type of thing. Could this one be different? Yep, but it is. There's a lot of very interesting things on the horizon that could substantially change things. Recently read a book on how, since AI is capturing all the different elements, eventually applications like Workday and Salesforce, all those go away, because if AI is capturing everything you do as a business, all you need is a script in order to get out from AI exactly what you're looking for. In fact, AI can even write that script and tell you what you want when you didn't even know it. So it's interesting that it's very hard to predict what time frame that will come about, or if and how things evolve. I'm excited and curious and a little bit scared.
Yeah.
I think we all are.
With any new technology, right?
Right.
It's something where I think a lot of people think it's here and it's going to take over, and it's to me, I feel like it's still in such an early phase. I mean, there's so much possibilities that is going to be, with it, but for now, I think it's just enhancing certain job
That's right.
functions.
It's evolutionary, not quite yet revolutionary, I think, from a company operating standpoint.
Yes.
We're not in the Jetsons yet, right?
That's right. That's right. That's right.
Flying cars and
Right.
someone's doing the job for us. We're not there yet.
Exactly.
Duane, I'm going to test you a little bit here, Duane.
Excellent.
Based on your experience. So it's just because I've worked in high tech before, right? So your experience as a cost management person,
yes,
dealing with the specific department. I'm going to mention the department.
Yes.
Within the company, and most companies have this, right? And how you balance innovation and cost, because they probably do not want to see you or hear of you, is R&D.
Yeah.
R&D is the one, as you know, for an innovation company, whether it be high tech or service, they just want to be left alone, right? They just want to be in the lab doing their thing and just spending money, right? Because they technically short term, they don't add any revenue to a company. Sure, those technologies are for future growth.
Yeah.
But how do you deal with those? And how often have you had that opportunity?
Well, pitch it. It depends on the company. Sometimes they're actually in large scale. They can be a small department within companies, which I'm not sure is a healthy thing, right? Because maybe you want your R&D being much larger, and then you start getting to do pharmaceuticals and such, where it's a huge part of their investments. I think I try to sell it a little bit like when you look at a startup company, they are the peak of innovation. They are putting out product quick. They're developing things. They are so efficient. And I tried to go to those companies and say, look, those companies they weren't flush with resources. They didn't get everything they needed or wanted in order to develop that. And in fact, by you going through and flooding resources and funding to an organization that is responsible for innovation, you may be hurting your own innovation. Lean and mean is very applicable to a startup type environment. So I try to encourage companies to really have a startup type of frame of mind in their R&D groups. And we look at that and say, is that what you have here? Are they R&D companies at small startups? They're not out there hiring a lot of consultants to do their work. They have a few people that are very good at what they do, and small tight group, and then they are able to produce some amazing type of things. And I try to convince companies that is a better model than the big behemoth R&D, let's throw money at it type of solution. I'm not there on that. But other industries like pharmaceuticals and those type of things, it's a big investment for them too. But they spend a lot of time trying to make that very early on, identifying where they have winners and losers and cutting those losers because that they just don't think are going to develop into something. So they try to get in and out quickly. So I've had my experiences with that type of thing, and I think I'm a believer that lean and tight organizations produce better results.
Liz, I think you kind of sidestepped the question. I was hoping to hear some battle stories.
Marco wants the tea.
I've certainly had my share of battle scars that I've won and lost, but I guess I don't always. I look at it more as one of those not trying to win every battle, but the overall war. And so I certainly, there's times when I've tried to challenge certain costs, and And one of the things I even describe in my book is that when a company has certain priorities, you have to be a little bit, those are cost areas you have to approach a little bit more delicately, a little more with a little more diplomacy, because those are priorities for the company. And if you start with those, you're going to alienate yourself quickly. I usually prove myself elsewhere, show results elsewhere, and then we start to focus a little bit more on on those priority like R&D type efforts. And I think now that we have a track record, I have a little bit more political capital to be able to make a difference in those groups. But there's battle scars. I've lost a lot of battles to R&D, to marketing, to that I disagreed with, and sometimes I was proven right, but you have to roll with those. Overall, I think I did a lot for those particular companies, even if I didn't win that particular fight.
I can hear your voice change every time you mention marketing. It's a little,
little bit of
PTSD there.
Yeah, I know.
Absolutely.
It's okay, Duane. We're a counseling show too. We're just gonna.
I appreciate that.
Lay on the couch. We'll talk about it. So, Duane, let's talk about the book. So, when this airs, your book will be out. What prompted you to write it in the first place?
I felt that companies were doing a lot of things wrong from a cost management standpoint. And I felt like it was hurting a lot of people. It was hurting the company employees. It was hurting the shareholders. It was hurting everyone tangentially involved with the company. And I felt like there was a kind of a better solution, a better path forward. And I wanted to kind of express that. And I thought a book would be one of the best ways to do that. I think coming on these type of podcasts, and I'm thrilled that there's a podcast that talks about these things, that comes out of the shadows a little bit there. I joke that that cost management tends to be treated like plastic surgery, where they want the results without anyone knowing it was done.
Yeah.
It's our little secret, Duane.
And so you really have to, you really should be talked about. It shouldn't be something that's shunned, and companies should be open about why that's important. And it has to be believed that being lean and mean and svelte, as I call it, is important for making a company successful. The company will be more successful that way than if they ignore costs and let bloat gain a foothold.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, where can you find the book?
It's good. It's Amazon. It's probably always the safest path.
Yes.
You can even you can look it up by my name, Duane Deason, or Operationally Svelte, manage costs to increase profit and enhance performance. So I'm sure if you look it up either way, there hopefully it'll come up there. And I appreciate anyone who wants to take a look at it and see if they agree with my methodology.
Yeah, absolutely.
Liz, I got 2 follow-up questions. I know it's coming towards the end, but I can't help myself.
I know you
Duane
can't.
keeps
Bring
putting
it, Mark.
ideas on.
Bring it.
So Duane, 2 questions, right? One is, have you gone in to diagnose the company and say, you know what, your issue is not cost management. You are way too lean. In fact, you just haven't cut the fat. You're really cutting into the muscle now. So you're not operating on all cylinders. You're really hurting yourself. Have you seen a situation, and it's hard to believe that that's possible, but where you have to say, hey guys, yes, it's great that you guys are focused on the cost, but you're overshooting the mark. You're hurting yourself in other places.
I have to say, because don't forget, I get called in when they usually think there's a problem. I'll say it this way, because there was one company that just had that reputation where the owner was so frugal that he bought me in just because he wanted to be more frugal. And I did say that I'm just not sure I can really add a lot of value here, because after taking a look here. And so there are circumstances where I've seen that. But for the most part, I don't see that anywhere within most companies. I see it within departments. So I won't say overall the company, there's opportunities within all companies, but then I do go into certain departments and say, look, I think this function's starved. I see that a lot in like project management, where they're very lean on project management teams and those type of things. And those teams, when they're applied, can be huge in helping meeting deadlines and making sure projects stay on focused and on cost. And so I do think that certain departments, I've certainly recommended that they improve the budget on those items.
And the second question I have, which is kind of shifting gears a little bit, the complexity or the timing, if a company brings you in before or during an M&A, right? Which, when you're merging 2 companies together, or one company is buying another company, I mean, there's a lot of things going on, as you know, and I assume that bringing you in maybe early beforehand is good. Bringing you after is good, but during is probably not good, because you don't know I mean, there's still smoke in the air,
Yeah, yeah.
clear
Well,
vision.
so I would suggest that I can add value that whole cycle. So I
Yeah.
would say that from the beginning, we can start to look at where synergy is going to be available, where they're not. And I think a lot of the mistakes are made early. And so I do think you can add some value at that stage. I think during, just unless the company has their own team that's undergoing those implementation efforts, you want to make sure that they're all working and getting the projects done and completing them timely. Because one of the biggest things I see in M&A type projects is that there's always, the company being acquired always has systems and processes that are so ingrained into that particular company, even if there's overlap at the buyer, that they end up leaving the old systems in place because it's just too big of a lift in order to implement that change and bring them on to the parent company.
Right.
And what happens over many acquisitions, you end up with all these redundant systems that are so ingrained into a particular company or business subsidiary business process that you can't uproot it and you can't consolidate it. And so
Right.
you end up with a lot of overlapping costs, a lot in both the applications and SaaS applications and people. And so I do think that through all those different phases, I think someone like myself can add value in that type of thing. I don't think day one, an acquisition when everyone's hugging and saying, congratulations, I need to be, going in there and trying to rattle the cage. That's not what I'm suggesting, but there's a lot that can be going on at each phase of that can add a lot of value.
Right, because we've seen some major, not just acquisitions, maybe that's a bit easier, but these major mergers.
Yes.
Like, when Raytheon merged with, I think, United Technologies, that's a massive merger,
Oh
right?
my God.
That's got to be like really ugly how to figure how that works out, right?
Yeah, no, that's again, yeah, that's it. When you have two peers that have very overlapping systems and stuff like that, that's a different approach. And you do have to implement those two different, integrate those systems, and that can be a beast.
And talking about how you notice when you go into companies that they've acquired, we get this like Frankenstein effect, right? Where you just got bolts from here and pieces from there, and you don't know how they made it work. They made it work. Maybe it's not efficient, but they just didn't think of it well enough in advance or as they were going through the process. So they really got this ugly thing that's working for them, but they don't know how to take it apart because they're afraid that the machine will stop working completely.
That's right. And the time to correct those things is a long time frame. Mm-hmm. The payback is you have to almost sometimes measure it in 5 or 10 years in order to pay for that
break even. Right. Duane, and last question: which industries do you see, at least as a whole? I know broad brush, doing it well or doing it better, and which industries, from your experience, you're being called into more often?
Yeah,
more challenged.
So I would say the companies that I see doing it well, because I'm from the Washington, D.C. area, are government contractors. They tend to, because they have
They're motivated.
They're motivated. Right. They're
yes.
right. Those
they don't have a choice.
There's the old saying that you can make a little bit of money if you go into government contracting, but only if you start with a lot. They don't make a lot of they don't make a lot of money, and so they have to operate fairly tight. And when they bid on projects, they're kind of G&A refund rate and those type of things are measured and competitive. So they're the most open to cost control initiatives and being very careful with capital. On the other spectrum, it's not as much a particular industry. I would say it's much more the growth rate. So you have like different industries at different times that take off. And so if a company is growing really fast, I find that they have the most opportunity. And so I think from that standpoint is the faster they grew, probably the weaker the foundation that they have. Most of those companies, I think flashback would be technology type of companies come to mind at this point.
They're just happy they're making tons of money and they're just not looking at the underbelly, right?
That's right. That's right. Until all of a sudden they need to. Things change. Yeah. All companies, if you're doing really well, competition will be nipping at your heels very shortly. And if you have a inefficient structure, they're gonna gain ground on you because you're operating, you're more bloat and your bloat's there and your innovation's slowing down. And if you're not lean and mean, then the competition is going to creep up on you at some point there.
Yeah.
Liz, you got to cut me off.
I know. I'm waiting. I'm waiting for you to stop talking. This is where I add value is, okay, Marco, we're wrapping up here, because he'll just
I know.
I just hit the mute button. It's much easier. But Duane, where can everyone find you and learn more about the efficacy group and just maybe continue the conversation with you, or maybe even need your services and bring you in? Where can they find you?
My website's theefficacygroup.com, or there's actually someone else that's there. I just noticed today also has the efficacy group up there. So mine's just efficacygroup.com, EFFICACY group.com. If you get on a site and it doesn't have cost management on it, then you're not on the right site. So.
You've gone too far.
I've labeled it everywhere.
And Duane, is there going to be a book tour as soon as this launches?
I'm TBD. Let's say I haven't booked the plane tickets quite yet. How's that?
Well, if you come to
Marco loves
Boston,
the book tour. He loves the book tour. And then Marco, you get one more question in you. I know you have.
I'm going to let you do a formula, Liz, because you know what it is. You know what? This is like I'm meeting famous people at the beginning of the Hollywood star, right? Before they were famous, kind of thing.
I'll remember you still, Marco, after, no matter what.
I appreciate that, Duane. Go ahead, Liz. Ask the question I'm about to ask him.
He wants to know, because I just know him so well, is do you have an audio version of the book, and are you narrating it? Or did you hire some big shot celebrity to narrate for you?
Great
See,
question.
Marco, you don't even have to show up, so I can just answer that.
Great question. Look at that.
Yes,
see that,
yes,
Liz?
because it is very much a topic of mine. So on the first part, yes, I do have an audiobook. Because you can't really start it until you list on Amazon. And so it won't come out at the same time. So it'll probably be a couple more weeks out. And I decided because of time, and I don't feel like my voice is all that conducive to reading, that I did hire a professional to do it. And so he's actually completed his reading of it. I'm very accurate. He did a great job, and I'm proofing it and listening to it. I think I'm about midway at this point, so it should be out relatively soon. Another area AI is going to overnight change. I got when I put this out for bid, I got over 60 bids for people wanting to do my recording, and I would tell you that I wonder in 5 or 10 years that industry's gone.
Yeah,
there'll be because
absolutely.
AI can, if I say, look. I want a slight more pause in your between your words, or a little more emphasis here. It can change right throughout the whole book instantly.
Yep. Yeah.
So it changes. I can see AI being a very powerful tool in that, and it's sad in some ways, because it's a really interesting group of people that does that.
Yeah. Well, we've actually cloned Marco's voice, so we.
Okay.
We have some experience with the AI voice.
Duane, they can clone my voice, but they can't clone me. You can't clone this.
Not yet.
Not yet.
No way.
I don't think we're... All right. Well, Duane, thank you so much. This was a great conversation.
Yeah, thanks,
and I will have all that information on the book and where to find you in the show notes. And
thanks
good
so
luck
much
on the book.
Thanks so much,
you, Duane.
I appreciate being a guest.
No, thanks for coming on.
All right.
Are you ready to launch your Lean Six Sigma journey? At WorkStream Academy, our White Belt course isn't just another click-through certification. Our instructors bring over 30 years of real-world experience and have personally curated every lesson to give you the fundamentals you need: no jargon, no fluff, and always relevant to today's workplaces. If you're looking for more than a certificate, if you want training that truly matters, discover the difference with WorkStream Academy. Sign up for White Belt training today, and let's build your continuous improvement journey together.